A puzzling and potentially damning tweet from the President of the United States. President Trump now providing a newer explanation for his firing of General Michael Flynn, tweeting this: "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the Vice President and the FBI. He has pled guilty to those lies. It is a shame because his actions during the transition were lawful. There was nothing to hide." The tweet is a potential major shift from the explanation Trump gave for Flynn's dismissal back in February.
I didn't, but Mike, excuse me, no, I fired him because of what he said to Mike Pence. Very simple. Mike was doing his job. He was calling countries and his counterparts. So it certainly would have been okay with me if he did it. I would have directed him to do it if I thought he wasn't doing it. I didn't direct him, but I would have directed him because that's his job.
Okay, so what's critical here is the timeline. If the president now says he knew Michael Flynn lied to the FBI when he fired Flynn on February 13th, then why did the president ask then FBI Director James Comey to let the investigation go the very next day? In his opening statement to the Senate Intelligence Committee, Comey wrote that on February 14th, President Trump asked him to drop the FBI investigation into Flynn, saying, quote, "I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go." Of course, the big question now, did the President of the United States just admit to obstructing justice? For more on these developments now, let's bring back CNN's Kara Scannell and Boris Sanchez. Let's begin with you, Boris, in New York, where the president is. What more are you learning about his tweet?
Hey there, Fred. Yeah, that tweet was sent out shortly after a fundraising lunch here in Midtown Manhattan, the only public event that the president is holding today in his short stop in New York. He didn't really mention Michael Flynn during his speech, so it was a bit surprising to see that tweet come out shortly after he left this restaurant. He did mention Michael Flynn, as you showed in that clip earlier, when he was departing Washington to New York, saying that there was no collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. We've heard from White House sources saying that the president is not worried about the fact that the former national security advisor is now cooperating with the special counsel in its investigation. However, the president's tweet and the fact that Flynn has now admitted to lying to the FBI does raise a series of questions, as the White House is trying to distance itself from Michael Flynn, describing him as an Obama-era official and making the claim that President Obama gave approval for Michael Flynn to have those conversations with Sergei Kislyak and other Russians. There's the other side, where it's been widely reported that President Obama specifically warned Donald Trump, then president-elect, against hiring Michael Flynn as national security advisor, and the fact that shortly after the inauguration, you had the acting attorney general, Sally Yates, who was ultimately dismissed by President Trump, warning the White House that Michael Flynn could potentially be blackmailed by Russian officials. Beyond all of that is the fact that this politically is a cloud that hangs over the White House. Notice that right now we're not discussing the major legislative achievement that this administration put on the board yesterday in passing tax reform after months of working toward it. This is something that the White House is not happy to address, but it is something that the president will continue having to answer as he goes through the next several weeks, with more and more information coming from that special counsel probe, Fred.
All right, let's bring in Kara Scannell now. So, Kara, the president's tweet today contradicting earlier explanations for Flynn's firing?
Well, as today the president said that he fired Flynn because he had lied to Vice President Pence and had lied to the FBI. What Trump had said previously was that he fired him because he had lied to Pence. Let's take a listen to what he said in February.
When I looked at the information, I said, I don't think he did anything wrong. If anything, he did something right. He was coming into office. He looked at the information. He said, that's fine. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to be, and he didn't just call Russia. He called and spoke to both ways. I think there were 30-some odd countries. He's doing the job. You know, he was just doing his job. The thing is, he didn't tell our vice president properly, and then he said he didn't remember. So either way, it wasn't very satisfactory to me.
One thing that is consistent is that he is distancing himself from Michael Flynn and distancing himself by the conduct involved. He's saying that the only thing Flynn did wrong was lie to the FBI, which he's now pleaded guilty to, but he's not saying there was anything wrong with the underlying conduct, which is interesting because in Flynn's paperwork that was filed in court as part of his guilty plea, he says that he had spoken with Russians and other officials in consultation with transition officials, and specifically at the direction of one senior transition official, which CNN has learned is Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law.